Um, so you heard us mention toward the end of last calendar year that we were going to be instituting these periodic, what we call talking circles for our program, for the professional development program. And it's really going to be, for the most part, informal. You want to jump to the next slide, Sarah? I'm going to spare you the disclaimer and just ask you to read it at your own leisure. Just saying that this is not an official endorsement of policy. It's an informal conversation. And today we're going to talk, just give you a few updates. We're going to talk, we want to hear from you. I'm hoping to hear just briefly from you all some updates on your end and what's been going on. And then I want to spend the better part of today kind of talking through just a few frequently asked questions that a number of you have been raising, and I thought would be good to share with everybody, just our thinking around those questions. And then a couple of updates on performance reporting and monitoring. So we'll get back to that in a minute. And then last, Sarah, I'm going to ask you to walk folks through just some of the upcoming broader technical assistance events that Synergy is providing to us. And I know we're also joined today, just as an aside, by my colleague from Anlar Westat, from Karen Schroll, who, as you all know, is your support for the PDP DCS system. Next slide. That's me, but you know me. Next slide. And I just kind of want to reintroduce, I know we've got my boss on the line today, and she's listening in with us, as well as one of my colleagues, Jennifer Leo. Dr. Sabis Burns is on. She's our group lead over our discretionary grant programs. And I thought I know some of you might be familiar, some of you might not. I have a colleague, Bianca Williams, and our newest colleague, Donna Bussell, who are supporting our demonstration grants program. Jennifer, who's on the line with us and listening in today, is now leading the Native American language grants, or NALET Ed program grants. Both of those just went through grant competitions, as well as the STEP, or State Tribal Education Partnership grants, which are led by my colleague, Shella Ortega. And then I work on professional development. Next slide. So I'll ask Sarah that we kind of take it off the screen for a moment, and I'm going to just ask those of you, and ask for volunteers. I won't voluntold anybody. If you want to give any updates, just any major or minor accomplishments or challenges that have come up for you, and that can help kind of inform the conversation as we head into some of the FAQs today. So I'll turn it over to you all and see who wants to start.
I can go. It's Renuka De Silva from UND. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Lovely to see everybody. And actually, it's a welcome change to see faces, and everybody's got their screens on, right? So accomplishments. We've got 4 of the students who are student teaching. I mean, we've only got the 6 to start with. And the other 2, honestly, COVID has really taken a toll. I mean, personally, and as well as their legal sponsorships. So it has been quite a challenge for them, but I have been meeting with them almost daily, sometimes, and then weekly, and then with particularly one of the students is, well, I've been talking with her almost daily and showing her ways to problem solve some of the issues that have come up personally, and with the sponsorship and all of that. I mean, legal guardianship. So, but you know what? They're being directed. It's great. They're moving through, and I just met with the principal and one of our students, because the first observation is coming up. So, and I wanted to meet with them and make sure everybody's on the same page and all of that. So that's very exciting. The other 2 are coming up very shortly, in a couple of weeks, because you know what, everybody started at different times. So that's how it is. And the challenge is that COVID, and I'll tell you, one of the things is, I really don't think we should cut them off just because they've had this challenge. And I think we really need to work with them. And I think at this moment, I mean, even if like one of the students is trying, I just got a message from her. She's been writing to the administration and all of that to say, hey, can we come as part-time? Well, my thing is, why not? I mean, we can't punish people for something that is not of their doing or something that they didn't invite. These are all good students who really worked hard. Not saying that they didn't have the challenges, but that's okay. But when somebody cannot attend and has got COVID, and after that, they have had other things. I mean, even falls, you know, I mean, you're just in such a mindset. So I like to put forward that we need to somehow accommodate those students. They've come 3/4 of the way, just the last. I mean, even if it means extending another semester or two, well, nothing much is happening in the summer, but what's wrong with graduating in the fall or spring of 2022? So those are the options that I wanted, and I wanted to put it out there. I think that's the way to go. That means real support and real value and reciprocity. I think that's the way to go. I mean, that's my personal thing. And I'm glad I had a chance to mention this in front of everybody. So then you can tell me, no, Renuka, you have to cut them off. I don't think so, but you know.
Well, I'll say thank you, number one, for your honesty and for sharing, you know, and just to be clear, this is a safe space. You're not going to get a, you know, high risk letter from me tomorrow.
Yeah.
This is nothing like that. I want to be clear. This is actually helpful for me, and it kind of preempts something Sarah and I were just talking about. Of it would be helpful to know two things that I'm taking away from this. I know you're not unique, unfortunately, in this situation, and I would really like to understand the scope and scale that others are seeing with this kind of, with the delays, if you will. Let's talk about them as delays in training program completion. And beyond that, I'm also interested to know, Renuka, to what extent do you see your own level of effort shifting? Meaning, you know, if you had to put a number on it, would you say, you know, 10% more of your time is being spent on the support now as a result of this work, you know, of these challenges? 25, 5? You know, you don't have to answer me now, but feel free to kind of weigh in, or you can put it in the chat box as we go. I'd really like to encourage you guys to kind of assess your own time and effort in supporting that work. That's also helpful for us to know. You know, last year, and we're going to come back to this, we talked briefly about, or we didn't talk briefly, we actually did some regulatory flexibility, as you know, with some of those who were finishing up and giving them more time, specifically more time if they had already graduated during that COVID period, in order to be able to have flexibility in the time it takes to find placement in anticipation of greater challenges for placement. I think if we're hearing different types of challenges, this is one of those, Renuka. I'd like to hear what those are. You know, as we have administration transition, as people come to us asking what is the need, this kind of anecdotal information is helpful, just separate and apart, and obviously preliminary to getting an APR, where I know you guys do a great job of describing these kinds of things. So let me ask somebody going to go next. Carmelita?
Okay, thank you. What I'm experiencing is something I'm going to ask everybody in the room about, and with regard of continued to pay for courses that students are not completing. So what the ramification of this is that, yes, as Renuka is saying, I have students that I know for sure are not going to go to commencement this spring. The bulk of them are, but I have about 8 that will not be finishing in the spring because they either had to stop out They were in courses in the fall, did not complete the course. And so of course that tuition is lost. So those funds coming out of the budget are lost. I need a no-cost extension to complete them. So I'm being really careful now and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, so how many times do I pay for a praxis that they either were not prepared, didn't do well, couldn't get to the praxis site was closed, what all these different things. So then see, my budget is still rolling, but my participants are not necessarily completing on time. I'm worried. I'm thinking, boy, where do I say? I said, well, you did not complete this course twice now. Do I say, do you need to pay out of pocket? Give me some guidance with regard to what we should do as program leaders with students who are, they say, no, I can do it this time. I'm going to do it this time. Okay, fine. We pay the tuition and then only to find out that something else happened, and most of the time I get documentation. I need to know what happened. I got documentation of it. But I'm getting worried now as we're going into the spring. And so I'm trying to be careful with those dollars that I have to make sure that I have that support money as we go into the fall. When training has closed September 30th, I'm asking for no cost extension to finish. What do I do? Anybody help? That would be great.
Thank you, Carmelita. I'm going to leave that question out there, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask folks to move on. And if I can get another volunteer to kind of give updates or challenges, and if you want to respond to Carmelita's question. Anybody else want to weigh in? Susan?
So I'm from Stonechild College in Montana, and we definitely have dealt with many challenges because of the COVID. There has been a couple positive things, though, that I did want to say. Number one, we were lucky enough to not lose one student during COVID. We kept them all. We went from 0 online classes to all online, and that was a huge undertaking. I think the instructors would say that we're all much more educated because of that. We feel confident now that we can actually offer an online platform, to the point where our president has said, from now on, even when COVID goes away and we're getting more back towards normal, we shouldn't be taking excuses from students. Oh, I couldn't attend today. I'm babysitting my kids or whatever, because that happens a lot. Well, you know what? You got a computer at home. You can still log in. You can still be present in the classroom. So in the long run, we think this may actually help. And we've been with our student teachers, we've had to be very creative. We've had to do some simulated school experiences with them, but we've just been flexible and we've been moving along. We graduated 5 students this past semester, and we have 2 coming up. So, I mean, I'm not saying it hasn't been extremely challenging, but I'm pleased that we've learned a lot and that we haven't lost any student. That was the big thing. So.
That's great, Susan. Thanks for sharing. And you are not alone in that, rethinking the delivery model options that you have that benefit both you guys, possibly from a cost perspective, as well as the students from being able to maximize participation. So that is something I will say I hope to come back to in a future talking circle, because I think it'd be great for you guys to share your thinking as you plan, those new opportunities in future semesters. Others, trying to see if I see hands. Robert.
Hello, and I'm from Fond du Lac, and in the past, we've always started our program, try to start it on time, but we're a small college, so we have to partner. What that has meant in the past is that we've had to rush our student and the credit load that they've had to carry. The last time we decided that we weren't going to do that, and we developed a bridge program so that all of our students in the first year, the first semester or 2 through the summer, as we started, because we had to hire, we had to get everything together before we could even get our students before we could even begin. The bridge program allowed our students to all start together. And then we were able to offer the credits to them without jumbling them up with 18 to 20 different credits in order to come up to speed. When we got done with our credit hours and our classes, we had a no-cost extension for our induction year. We were able to get our students graduated, and now we're completing the testing. All of our students, because we do have a K-12 on Fond du Lac reservation, were hired by the reservation. So we were able to work with local school districts and within the Fond du Lac band also to be able to get our students placed. But it was the no-cost extension that added on another year for us to complete everything. Because if we would have had to compete as we have in the past, we would have not been able to get our students fully completed with the program. So I would keep that in mind as you go forward, is that if you're falling behind with some of the things because of COVID, keep in mind that a no-cost extension, also on the second part of that is you will have savings if you do lose some of your students. You will have some of that you can roll into the induction year. So that will help you not run out of dollars. In fact, Angela is getting a whole bunch of money from us simply because we were unable to spend it. So we sent money back. We're sending money back.
Thank you for sharing that, Robert. I think there are two things I want to touch on. One that relates back to Carmelita's question about, just how much investment do I make in any one individual and when do I stop? I'll say a few things about that. One is, this is something I've shared with everybody across many topics, but I would say to include this one, which is, it's important to consider, for the future, the idea of creating a written policy around those decisions. A decision tree about how you arrive at what you're willing to do or not willing to do. It does two things. It protects you because you have an equitable way of arriving at those decisions. So nobody feels short-shrifted, right? It's equitable across your participants. And two, it's something that's standardized, that's easy for you to come back to, and evidence of, this is how I did it. And I'm not, there's no deviation and no inconsistency. Now, to your point, Robert, there are a number of you on today that have really large training balances. And, I would weigh you have the money to let them keep trying, to complete a course. If praxis is part of the training program, then paying for the praxis, whatever those costs are, with the understanding that to the extent we're talking specifically now about training costs, i.e. those costs that they are then on the hook for, right? Whether they finish or not, it becomes a tougher question and a balance for you of really thinking about, is me adding more debt to this person? Is it do I really have a firm belief or evidence that I feel confident, even if it takes them 3 times, they will find placement, I don't worry, or I'm really concerned that they might not finish because it becomes less a policy issue or a federal requirement so much as a moral question, right? Of really grappling with trying to be fair and give them every opportunity while at the same time conveying to them in each opportunity that you're giving them what the consequence is, and being very clear. And I know, you guys are, but I think we can't underscore that enough. The importance of being really explicit about what that consequence is of not completing. They are on the hook for that cost. So, I know, and I think I would argue it's probably a case-by-case basis. But again, if you have a policy with criteria, factors you consider in making those decisions, for instance, that goes a long way, again, to helping you make consistent, equitable decisions that are fair to all of your participants. And if you don't have a large budget, well, then, you know, it is that, right? If I don't have a large budget, it's kind of decided for you about how flexible you can be. So, and the no-cost extension, Robert, thank you also for bringing that up. I'm going to come back to that in a moment too. Any other items that folks want to share before we transition into the FAQs? And it doesn't mean you can't talk then either. Just any updates folks want to give? And I don't know if I'm seeing everybody in my screen, so please feel free to unmute yourselves and talk.
Yeah, even if you're not on camera, don't feel like you have to raise your hand in order to get called upon. You're welcome to unmute and just start sharing.
I'm happy to share. So hi everyone, this is Leslie from the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. We were excited to graduate 3 of our students in December. So in spite of everything that was going on and the continuing altering schedules, we were excited about that. We are moving forward with our spring. Our university did alter their academic schedule again as well, but thankfully we were able to accommodate that. A lot of our students have adapted to the virtual learning setting quite well, and we are working with them as we are working with pre-service administrators. So we have a different challenge of balancing their role now as teachers and also training them to be administrators. So that has been a new learning experience, I think, for all of us as they enter the world of virtual learning. We are working right now with those that are in quite of a limbo between induction and have not secured a job yet. So we have about 6 students in that sort of awkward space, but we are working with them and continuing to offer professional development, but just looking forward to more graduates in the spring.
Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that update. That's great. Honestly, I think if we can get them finishing a course, finishing an activity, every win is a big win right now. So again, I appreciate all the efforts you guys are clearly making to support the success of your participants. Sarah, let's go ahead and jump back to the slide deck. And again, at any point, guys, feel free to put questions or comments in the chat box. Sarah, I'll probably ask you to keep an eye on that for me and call it out. And if folks just want to unmute to ask a question or follow up, happy to take that too. So again, these are just some questions that have come up, and I'm fine to take any, you know, iterative or derivative of those questions if you have something slightly different. So the first question is, where do I send participants who want to initiate their service and or cash payback obligation? So I know in particular over this last year and a half, where you've had folks that have changed their mind about the program, maybe haven't finished, have now sort of hit that place where they've decided, in many cases, we've seen requests to pay back to do cash payback as opposed to service payback. All questions regarding payback should always start at the help desk for the PDP DCS. So don't hesitate to send them there. If you feel like that might be a policy question, I would still send them to Karen, who's on with us. You can wave, Karen. And just because she'll help handle sort of the logistics and the data aspects of that, and still direct any policy or you know, substantive issue back to the program office to address. Next slide, please. So this kind of comes back to some of what we were talking about earlier. I have training funds remaining due to no more recruitment. Can I use these for other purposes? So I've said this a little bit before, and I'll just try to add a little more context. So of course the answer is the easy answer, which it depends. So when we're talking about, you know, well, can I buy a copier? You know, can I get, you know, stuff? The easy answer is no. But if it's things, particularly, for example, you know, we've had an emphasis under the new regulations, and by new regulations, I mean what came out of ESSA, out of the elementary secondary Every Student Succeeds Act under the ESEA reauthorization back in 16, there was that increased emphasis on induction services. So while some of you are 16 grantees and 17 grantees that have those 4-year grants, it's just a reminder that our 18 cohort have 5-year grants with those 2 years of induction services. In some cases, we know your programs are not taking 3 years, for instance, to do the training. And so you're saying, well, you know, now that we have the time, people have been finishing, you know, what can I do? Because the folks who finished have finished. And to your point, Robert, some people have dropped out. You haven't recruited as many, whatever the reason, you have additional training funds. It's been case by case, but I will say that to the extent I'm getting requests from project directors for things like, well, we actually want to add these types of induction activities to make our induction programming more robust. Meaning at the end of the day, it's still training those participants that you have supported through their training program and now in the induction phase. In those instances, I will tell you that I'm happy to entertain shifting those training funds for that purpose. Meaning it's really, you know, it's the induction work, but it really is relevant and consistent. So we can talk about that. And when I say shifting, just to be clear, it doesn't mean that you're adding those training costs, those induction costs. So if we shift and you say, I'm going to pay for these 5 people to now do induction activity A, those costs do not go, they do not get applied towards service payback obligation because presumably you have exited them from the program. So that program, that debt is there and that doesn't move. When I talk about shifting, it's shifting to that direct cost category. So you're able to apply those as direct costs and not outside of the direct cost or not outside of the training area. Okay, so just, and I've had very different examples. I've had some people who've added, for example, sessions that are very sort of concrete skills building, i.e. we're teaching these people how to create school budgets. You know, we're having these a new series of sessions on, you know, hard skills that might not have been taught during the training program. Another example is there was one grantee that asked for funds to support and go into partnership with the state on an online training module that would support induction services, you know, there and beyond. And so absolutely, we support it. You know, we allowed them to use some of those funds for that purpose. So again, you know, as you're thinking about supporting your folks and whether it's moving into a no cost extension period, if you're in that NCE and you want to do that, that's also something viable. So I just wanted to remind folks of those opportunities. Let's see. Sarah, anything come up on the chat? Or are we good?
You're all good.
Okay, next slide. The next question, which I'm not getting so often, but I am getting, which is, can I use any of, or can I still recruit participants if we have funds remaining? The short answer is no. We're beyond that phase at this point for all of our active grantees, whether you're 16 NCE, 17, or 18. Even if you're 18 with plans for an NCE, we would say no. And that's simply because even as late as the 18s, we would expect that you have some semblance, as close as you can get, to that 2 years of induction services against which you applied for. So that's a biggie in particular for the 18 cohort, is being able to get to some solid induction services for at least a length of time. And so Renuka, I raised that kind of to your point of, you know, back to these delays inevitably that are happening right now and trying to understand, well, yeah, you'll probably have to do a no cost extension. And the one thing I ask people to continue to weigh is factor in the funds or support or, you know, for your own time to be able to continue to manage the grant. So as you think about the NCE, just being clear, You know, it doesn't matter if you've got $200,000 in a training line if you know you aren't going to have any money to support somebody to manage the project, right? So just making sure that you're thinking through all of the direct cost needs that might come through at that time. Any questions on that? Karen, anything you want to add on that? We good?
I think we're good. Thanks, Angela.
Okay, next slide, please. So when should I ask for a no-cost extension? So I'll say two things. We've got our FY17, and Linda, I see you. Thanks for being here. And we've got a couple of other FY17 grantees that are in their last year. I'll just say that typically we expect that if you want a no-cost extension, you get a no-cost extension. The only reason you would not get a no-cost extension is at this time is if we said you were non-performing, which is not the case that we see right now for any grantees. So it's not a given, but frankly, it's pretty hard to not get one at least 1 year, up to 12 months of a no-cost extension period, which is what typically grantees are allowed. Now, if you're thinking already, wow, I really need 2 years, I'll just say this, the first year is never an issue. The second year typically does require OESC leadership approval in order to move forward. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about what the needs might be in terms of more time for a grant. And I am saying this to the 18 grantees, knowing that you really want to try to get to as close to 2 years of induction services activities as possible. And then in terms of no cost extension, it's also important for the purposes of your reporting on the DCS. And Karen, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about how we deal with no cost extension grantees and what that means for reporting.
Yes, so if you are approved for a no cost extension, please, let us know. We get information from Angela, but the PDP DCS is separate from G5, so we need to know so that we can update it in there. Because what will happen if you don't have a no-cost extension and your grant is ending, then we're going to start pestering you to make sure that all of your scholars are exited from the PDP DCS before your grant ends or right after the grant ends. So that's why it's important to kind of keep us in the loop on whether or not you're getting a no-cost extension.
Let's go to the next slide, Sarah. Thank you, Karen. So we share this all the time, as you know, but again, just a reminder of where you can look for support, and just underscoring here, anytime you need to add a participant, exit a participant, the status is changing on a participant, like a leave of absence. And so I want to remind folks about that too, about leave of absence, and making sure that you're updating the system if and when that issue occurs for your participants. That's really important. So we need to be able to keep track of that in the data collection system. And I would arguably say even more so right now, where I'm hearing, you have folks challenged or deciding at the last minute. We have regulatory guidance regarding the criteria for leave of absence and what that means. So I'll just direct you back to the regs for that, but just make sure that you're also keeping up that information, those updates for your participants then. There is a time limit on leave of absence, and forgive me, I have to go back to the regs to look at the exact number of months. But it is finite for sure. The other thing I do want to mention is coming back to the DCS, and we talk about performance. If you want to go to the next slide, Sarah. I'm going to let Karen talk about a little bit about what's coming up. But before we get to that, as we think about performance reporting, I will just throw in a little note to let you all know that in the coming weeks, I expect to identify at least 2 grantees for a monitoring call. And this is just standard monitoring protocols that we're carrying out. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing robust or I don't think too burdensome, but I just want to give you a heads up that you might hear from me. And that's not everybody, it'll just be a select few. But one of the things as we move into APR season and reporting season and what Karen will get to in the DCS, I know that at least as of the end of December in the quarterly monitoring reports that Karen shares from the DCS, we had quite a number of you that have a number of students that have not yet logged in to the DCS. So we've talked about this before, and just a little reminder to make sure that you're asking your participants to check on the DCS, check on the status, and to verify the data that you've reported in there. It helps ensure accuracy. There's no surprises to them later on. So we all want to make sure that we're handling that, because that is a factor in continuation awards as well as, closeout. So even closing out a grant, unless we have evidence that you've made every effort to reach people that maybe still haven't logged in, because that happens, and I know many of you have run into that too, we can't close a grant in compliance. So just a heads up about that. Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about reporting, what's coming.
Sure. So as you know, the PDPDCS is available to you all the time. Anytime you want to hop on in, you can. But we do each year sort of have what we call our data collection period. And that's where we go and we have you all make sure that everything is up to date in the PDPDCS. So going through all of your enrolled participants and making sure that everything's correct with the amount of time that they owe and the amount of money that they've received. So I'll be sending out an email to all of you as project directors and CCing those of you that have designated secondary users for the system on Monday, just sort of, letting you all know that this is coming up. We'll be starting our data collection period on February 1st, and we'll have a 60-day period, and we'll just we want to make sure that everything is up to date by early April. So at the same time, we're going to go ahead, Angela and I and another member of my team will do a presentation on February 2nd at 3 p.m. To kind of go over the annual requirements. We'll also be available at that point to do some demoing. There have been no changes. If you're very comfortable with the system, you don't need to hop in on February 2nd. But if you have a new person or you're bringing on a new secondary user, we definitely would love for them to jump in and receive some training. As far as your participants, I just wanted to give you a heads up, we at PDPDCS are also working to get those folks logged in. And so we have help desk staff making phone calls out to your participants as well, asking them and helping them log in. So we appreciate your efforts as well, because of course it's not often people pick up their phones for an unknown number, but people are calling us back. And I think it would help kind of coinciding our efforts with you sending an email to your participants, reminding them that this is something that they really should be doing.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions for Karen on this? Thanks, Karen. I'm typing in right now the regulatory language for leave of absence. So in short, I'm just giving you one part, by the way. The entire part is 34.263.8, but you can approve a leave of absence for a period of no longer than 12 months, provided that the participants completed at least half of the training in the project and is in good standing at the time of request. I'm reading here further, the PD permits leave of absence only if the institution of higher ed certifies that the training participant is eligible to resume his or her course of study at the end of the leave of absence. So you just need that verification, right? That it is fine for them to come back. And then a participant who is granted a leave of absence and does not return to his or her course of study by the end of the grant project period will be considered not to have completed the course of study for the purpose of project performance reporting. So that kind of goes back to Karen, and we've talked about this before, where I know there've been many of you who even, after the fact, maybe you have a newer grant and you've had some folks who finished. Even so, because we measure only that grant period time, if they have not completed within that said grant period, whether it's 4 years or 5 years, depending on which cohort you are, for the purposes of our performance reporting in the DCS, it looks like they have been exited without completion if it hasn't been during the grant period specifically. Now, grant period would include no cost extension period. Is that right, Karen? Just to verify. So
exactly. Yes. Yeah. The system will automatically. That's partly why we need to get that information from you, because the system will update with the no cost extension once we enter it.
Okay. Great. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to do, Sarah, is the slide, the chart right after this one?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I want to come back to the COVID flexibility that we talked about. Let's go to the next slide. This is a laundry list that I will send out via email to you all as well. But this is coming back to that COVID flexibility that we granted depending on whether folks had graduated, exited the program successfully between 10/1/2019 and 9/30/2020. And so what you see on the screen, Karen did us the favor of just running by grant. And, this is sort of a snapshot, but I would really recommend that you take a look for your grant, look at where your grant sits in terms of the number or numbers of people that you have that qualify for that flexibility, just to make sure that what you see here is consistent with what you believe to be the number of people that are eligible for that longer length of time to find job placement for the purposes of service payback. So again, I'll send this to you all via email afterward, or Sarah, I might ask you to do that for me. But just to make sure that you have that. And if you have questions about that or concerns that it doesn't match up to what you know to be the numbers, I would ask that you call the help desk. And Karen, I'll ask them to get with you and you can talk about, hey, you guys shared this chart and that's not the numbers that I have. We should have more, we should have less, whatever that number is. So if you see discrepancy, please follow up with Karen. Karen, anything else you want them to
No. If you see any, if this isn't what you all were expecting, then please go ahead. I'm actually I'm on help desk Friday evenings, from 6 to 8 East Coast time. But otherwise, someone else from the team can get a hold of me and I can double check everything that we've got in the system.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll just stop real quick and see if we want to cut to everybody, see if there's any questions.
I do have one quick question. This is Susie again from Stonechild. On the chart that you just showed, would those be the participants who, for instance, we have a 2016 grant. We did ask for a no cost extension. It shows 5 students on there that we requested the no cost extension for. But I noticed on our other grant that we have, which was also on that chart, different grant number, it shows 1, that'd be our 2018 grant. We wouldn't have requested any no cost extensions yet because, so
Yeah, it's not signifying a no cost extension. What it is signifying is the number is referring to the number of participants for that grant that qualify for that flexibility, i.e. that one individual, let's say I'm just saying one, if it's number one. It
is one, yeah.
Then that individual has up to 24 months to find job placement, as opposed to the normal 12 months. And we gave that flexibility to that select, it was 125, right? Total, I think, Karen, across the cohorts, 125 participants because of COVID. And it was one of many flexibilities that the department laid forth right after it hit, right? Back in the spring of 2020. So we're just highlighting, you know, I know some people weren't sure, so we wanted one to quantify it. And that way, if you see it, I'm like, that doesn't really match up, something's wrong, or maybe I didn't count somebody correctly or exited them when I should. It kind of helps clear up any discrepancies like that. So I just wanted you to know how many would qualify for that flexibility, meaning you're giving them different guidance, right? That you might be giving all of the others that didn't fall in that window. Because everybody else should be finding placement within 12 months. But, you know, that said, again, I think if you guys see some severe delays, if you guys are seeing lots of challenges, I really would like to know that sooner than later, because again, with the transition in administration, I would expect I could be getting questions, people asking, is there a need or something that we need to be considering that we're not yet? So.
Okay. Got it.
I have a question.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. So based on that, we had some students who completed before the date, which was the 9/30, but it wasn't until after and during the no cost extension period. However, due to COVID, we still had to complete some other ends of that. And so when does it actually, is it from the end date of the no cost extension or the subsequent from the 12/30? Because there's still a bit of processing that our admins have at the schools or the local levels. And I'm just curious, how does that get reported? And I think I emailed you asking how does that get reported in our report?
So you're talking now about something different. I just want to make sure we're shifting gears. You're talking about a final performance report and a due date based on your activity, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that
from that no cost extension, we were given this, or allowed, I guess, this much more time. And due to COVID, they have not been able to secure jobs. And it's just interesting how, how does that get reported if it's not met in the timeline of when it was proposed?
Well, besides what you're telling us in your narrative in your APR, right? Or your final performance report, you'll be reporting out what the numbers were, where they were when they finished. And kind of to your point, let's say, you know, your performance period ended at the end of December. But let's say you're going to have a final performance report in the next month or so. When you send that in, you know, you might tell me, just so you know, even though we had to exit all these students, because as Karen mentioned, when a grant ends, all of those students get exited, whether they have completed or not. And even if they were on track, meaning, let's say they're going to finish in May, we still exit them as not completed. And that's just because we have to do a snapshot in time and be able to capture all of that in one place. And so you can tell me in your narrative, in the qualitative data, really give me context for those numbers. So when I go and pull data from the PDP DCS, I'm going to see, oh, I'm just making this up, 3 of the 5 didn't finish. But when I get to your APR, I'm going to see, well, actually, you know, 2 of our 5 finished, 2 others are about to finish in May, but they're not going to get captured in the PDP DCS, and 1 is not going to finish. 1 dropped out, whatever it is. You know? So you're giving context, you're giving meaning to those numbers and interpretation in your case, in your final performance report. That's what matters at the end of the day, is seeing that. The DCS is helping us to report, again, for the purposes of the GEPRA measures that we're required to report. Those get, they kind of have a different purpose, if you will. We're substantiating the credibility and the quality and the validity of the program by being able to say we're working toward these goals, these GEPRA measures, these objectives and these targets. That's as a whole, as a program, meaning all of you guys together. We wrap up all that data. Karen helps us do that data magic that she does. We report that data. That data gets reported to Congress, but it's a snapshot in time. And again, that's strict numbers, but it makes it that much more important that when you know what Karen might have to give me at the end of a performance period, whether it's the whole grant period or a year, I know it's a snapshot in time, and you're going to help me fill the gaps in through your qualitative data, i.e. your narrative in your final or annual performance report, whichever one is coming up for any one of you. Is that helpful?
Yeah. I just heard when you mentioned the flexibility piece for our candidate or our teachers now to find jobs. It's a little bit longer.
So, I mean, we're going back now. That flexibility, we wrote those regs back in May. This was 2 months after it all started, right? After we all kind of went remote. Mm-hmm. So we had to kind of make an educated guess, right? We didn't know where things were going. So we felt safe being able to say over the course of essentially this last fiscal year, that was then. And, all I'm saying is this is now. If there are some really plaguing issues that all of you are having, and it's that urgent, it's why I'm recommending to you all now in real time, don't wait for an APR. Send me a note and tell me, look, I've got 9 of my 10 that are on the verge of dropping out because of COVID. And whatever those reasons are, or I can't get them placed, or I can't get them to finish, whatever those things are, if you really feel it's that much of an emergency, I'd like to hear about it sooner.
Okay,
great. And that just helps me relay if and when we get the ask from our incoming leadership of, what are the priorities? This is going to be one of, many, right? that we have right now, but it at least gives me some solid talking points and evidence, right? Data points that are going to be really important to convey the urgency.
Great, thank you, that's helpful.
Okay. We're coming up on 4 o'clock, so I just want to stop and see if there are any other burning questions or issues, or Sarah, if I missed anything in the chat.
Nope. Right now I'm all alone in the chat, but you're welcome to pop your questions over there if you'd rather not unmute.
And of course, if you don't want to publicize your questions, please feel free to send me an email, guys, and set up a time if that's easier to talk it through. Sarah, do we just have contact stuff on our last slide?
Upcoming events and then contact info.
Okay. Let me turn it over to you to talk about what's coming.
So we do have a couple of events coming up that I want to make sure everybody is aware of. We've been doing our distance learning series. I know some of you have been attending, as well as some of your participants. The distance learning series is open to everyone. So that means anyone on your team can attend, as well as, if there's sessions that you think would be beneficial for your participants, they're welcome to attend. I know we've gotten good feedback from some of those who have. So we have another one coming up this coming Tuesday. That's going to be talking about communicating with students and families. So we're going to be talking about some tips and strategies, as well as some free tools that you can use to help facilitate communicating with your students and with your families. And then we'll be kicking off 2 more sessions in February. We'll have one on the 9th talking about engaging students offline. So really talking about those kids who don't have access to internet or don't have regular access to internet or devices, and ways to keep them engaged in learning during this time of distance learning. And then the final distance learning session in February is on the 23rd, and that'll be talking about collaborating online. And these will continue throughout the spring, but those are the two that we're going to be covering in February. If you, any of your team or any of your participants have any feedback as far as topics or ideas for things that they would like us to cover in future distance learning sessions, please let us know. You know, we really want to make sure that these are meeting the needs of the participants. So, you know, feel free to give us some feedback. If you're saying, man, I hope in March they cover, there's still time to get your 2 cents in. And then we'll have our next PD program talking circle on February 19th, which is also a Friday from 3 to 4 o'clock Eastern. You'll notice these should have already gone on your calendar for the year. We sent them out as the full grant year. So they're always going to be on Fridays from 3 to 4 throughout this coming year. And then one other plug I want to get in as we move to the contact info and get to the end. We do have over in the chat box a quick feedback survey. So if you don't mind taking 2 to 3 minutes to give us just a bit of feedback, we would greatly appreciate that. And then I will also pop up our end of event poll right on the screen conveniently for you. These are 2 different things. So this quick one here in the event is super easy for you to fill out because it magically appears on your screen to complete. And then the other one literally takes 2 to 3 minutes, but gives us a little bit more detailed feedback that's super helpful. We also do have the dates for our project director meeting that's going to be happening in April. I'll put those, as I've kind of done with the other information, over in the chat box to save the date. And we'll have an official save the date going out via email probably next week. So look for that in your email inbox.
One last just reminder about the training opportunity on the PDP DCS that Karen shared. So we'll come back to that. You'll get something from Anlar Westat about that invitation, especially if you are new. I would encourage you to be a part. If you're a vet, you can decide how much or how little you need that support. And then one last item, thank you for the question in the chat box regarding requesting a no-cost extension. So the short answer is, if that is something that you're looking for, send us the request. You send me the request for a second no-cost extension and the reasons for it. I do know that they expect those to be substantiated with some clear reasons that are relevant to completion of the project. And then in the meantime, I'll find out from our leadership if there's any additional data or documentation people are going to need to make that decision about approving that request. Okay. That's it. It's 4:01. I've used 1 extra minute of your time, and I appreciate your attention and your contributions today. Oh, Renuka, there's a tough new grant. Yeah, so I hear.
One final question.
Yeah, that is not the question I was looking for, people. No, in all seriousness, I'm waiting with bated breath like you. So just know that when I know something, you guys will know something. And I appreciate your patience on this. I know you've been waiting long and patiently for this. But yeah, when I have more to share, I will. Okay. With that, please stay safe. Thank you guys for all this hard work you've been doing, and have a great weekend. Okay. Take care.